Welcome back to Media Hotline, a podcast about brands, media, and the business of editorial. My name is Danica Lo, and for the last 20 years, I've been a journalist, writer, editor, and digital director at some of the biggest media companies in the United States. Now I run a consulting business where I help brands and corporations with their digital and media strategies. This episode of Media Hotline is about how to build a high traffic editorial and content website. Now, at first glance, this may seem like a topic that's geared more towards the editorial side of listenership, but if you run a brand or a business that's starting, building, or scaling a content or content marketing practice, then keep listening because I think there will probably be something here for you too. Over the past few years, I've listened to dozens of podcasts, watched hundreds of YouTube videos, and read countless stories all about how independent creators are scaling their content businesses. And while there's so much amazing information out there about how to build a great personal brand online, building a content practice on top of a legacy brand or scaling an existing media platform or company is a whole different ballgame. Case in point, myself, because while I'm just a fledgling podcaster and a complete novice at YouTube, I've spent the past 20 years scaling media companies digitally. Here are some of my credentials. At Food and Wine, I led a digital team where we scaled organic traffic, that's traffic from search, 55% year over year. We also scaled referrals from social 103% year over year. And this is something I'm really proud of. We grew newsletter open rates 80% year over year to an average of 46% across all 17 editorial newsletters we deployed every single week. Yes, we were sending 17 editorial newsletters out every single week. At WWD, I grew traffic 67% in the first 3 months alone. At Glamour, I grew traffic to the news and politics vertical 147% year over year. And at Epicurious, I grew blog traffic 500% year over year, and overall site traffic, including to recipes and to articles, 60% year over year to 12 million monthly unique users, which bumped us from number 24 to number 8 in ComScore's food category in 4 months flat. That was a joint editorial and product endeavor. There are a couple of things that I think are really important to keep in mind as you embark on a traffic growth journey. One is that none of this is easy. It's a lot of work. The good news is that it's not difficult work. Think of traffic growth as the math of having a website. Growth is just leaning into best practices and continuing to do them. And if you have a great team, doesn't have to be a giant team, but where everyone is on the same page and moving in the same direction, you can see significant gains within as short a period as 3 to 6 months. The second thing that is super important to remember is that this is not about waving a magic wand. It's not about doing one trick thing or one magical thing, or as many digital directors seem to believe, it's not about publishing one amazing viral story. That is not going to sustain your editorial and content website or business. To build and sustain a high traffic website, you'll need to do about a dozen things simultaneously really well, but in a really sustainable way. Just a reminder that if at any point you, your brand, or business have any specific questions that you would like to submit to be answered on this podcast about traffic growth, about brands working with editorial, then please go to my website, danicalo.com, and click on Media Hotline. There's a contact form there where you can submit your questions to be answered on a future episode. Let's get to the tips on how to build a high traffic editorial and content website. The first thing to keep in mind is that most high traffic websites are either news websites or resource websites. News websites like CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, websites that rely on a high volume churn of content that's constant and up to date. Resource websites, on the other hand, are sites like Wikipedia or recipe websites or workout websites where people are constantly going back to them for evergreen content to use them as a resource. You'll have a better chance of building a high traffic website if you choose one of these paths. If the intent is to build a high traffic website for revenue purposes, there are other ways to look at revenue as well, including e-commerce, as well as paywall and subscription models. If you are able to build a subscription model that works, that can provide a stable foundation for editorial work. The challenge with websites that are trying to scale based on features, thought leadership, and opinion pieces is that the traffic funnel for that type of content relies mostly on social media and cultural zeitgeist, neither one of which are predictable or you can control, especially in the algorithm driven social media world that we live in 2023. The second tip for building a high traffic website is to find a content funnel for resource or foundational content. Now, you hear a lot about traffic funnels, but if you funnel traffic in and the audience has nothing to engage with and nothing to read, then they're just going to bounce. Building a broad content base is one of the best things you can do to keep your reader on your site, circulating throughout your content, and to bring new users to your website via search. Examples of content funnels include syndication partnerships with major news organizations such as the AP, or even with individual content creators who are looking for links back to their own sites. There are a lot of major corporate content partnerships. So, for example, a lot of special interest and lifestyle websites will partner with massive platforms and distributors like AOL, Yahoo, and MSN to syndicate content out. And in exchange for that syndication, the features or lifestyle website will receive either a payment or they can also include links back to related content. For a lot of food websites, for example, that is a major funnel of content. So, for example, if you're on yahoo.com and you may be reading a story about chicken recipes, that story may have come from a recipe website, and that story may include 3 related links to chicken recipes that are on the other website. That provides a traffic funnel as well as a content funnel for the aggregator and distributor. As your site grows, one of the biggest challenges for finding a content funnel is finding unique content partnerships. So, one of the things we were able to do while I was at Epicurious, for example, is to cut content partnerships with major book publishers, where we ingested en masse hundreds and hundreds of recipes from previously published cookbooks that didn't exist in digital format. So, we licensed those from big publishers and we were able to publish them online digitally for the first time. Another piece of advice for growing a high traffic website is to test your post cadence daily, weekly, and monthly. Back in the early days of content driven web, when big blogs really became super popular, things like Gawker and Jezebel and Eater, the time of day you were publishing was crucially important for reaching your audience because these blogs displayed on the website in reverse chronological order. So when you landed on the homepage, the latest story appeared at the top. Somewhere between 2014 and 2016, most of the content driven web moved away from that digital design and more towards featured modules and hero images and carousels. I think this is probably because of the way that advertising was changing. Businesses really started leaning into programmatic advertising around 2013. But still, even though the user experience has changed on websites, the time of day when stories are published still matters, mostly because of traffic funnels, both external traffic funnels as well as owned and operated platforms. Generally speaking, for most non subscriber, non paywall websites that are free to read, a good breakdown of traffic is 30% direct, where people are just typing in the URL to read the website, 30% social referrals, and then 30% search. A 30 split creates a stable traffic funnel for most websites. So if one falls off, for example, if Google changes its search algorithm or deprioritizes your site, or you decide to not index your site with Google AMP and it just falls off the front page, or if Twitter, who knows what Twitter is doing in any given month, or if Facebook changes its content algorithm, your website will still be safe. There will still be some traffic coming in. If you've been an avid consumer of online content for more than a decade, you'll remember there were a lot of businesses which at one point were built entirely on Facebook traffic. And as soon as Facebook decided that they weren't pushing those companies anymore, entire businesses closed down. So it's really important to not put all your traffic eggs in one basket. This all comes back to time of day of publication because a lot of external traffic sources index and comb content sites for stories at very specific times of day. Times of day that will be a mystery to you as a publisher, and no one will tell you because it's all like a game. There are some massive traffic sources, places like Flipboard, that seem to index content from their partners at very specific times throughout the day, sometimes very early in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, depending on what type of content you're publishing and that's being syndicated on Flipboard. There are also very specific times of day where massive aggregators like Yahoo, MSN, and AOL will aggregate content and ask for pitches if you have a personal relationship with those curation editors. So, testing posting cadence by time of day, time of week, subjects at different times of the day and times of week are very important because while you can't control external funnels of traffic, you can sort of figure out what works. Another tip for building a high traffic website is to develop and test newsletters in specific categories of interest. It is entirely possible and probably beneficial to run a slightly more generalist and broad based interest website and then funnel traffic to specific topics and categories based on newsletter. And don't forget to A B test almost every aspect of your targeted newsletters. I'm not just talking about what people are clicking on once they open the newsletter, but I'm talking about the subject length, the topics, the layout of your newsletters, where people are even scrolling to, the time of day you're sending it, the day of the week you're sending it, and constantly auditing your newsletter mailing list. Cleaning up your newsletter mailing list can mean the difference between your newsletter appearing in the spam folder of people's Gmails automatically or being put into a promotions folder, or if you're lucky, the main folder. So, what if you already have a website, but it's underperforming? The first thing I would suggest you do is to perform a brand exercise. Really hone in on the core messaging that is important to get across with the website and what you hope to achieve. Then, think about how you're going to achieve that. Part two is the strategy reassessment based on the brand core values and its goals. Creating a content strategy is no different than creating any other type of strategy. List out step by step what you would need to accomplish with your content in order to achieve those brand goals. The third thing I would suggest in order to revive an underperforming website is this is one of the most important things and one of the most tedious, but very worthwhile is a content audit. This is where you list out on a spreadsheet the top performing 100, 500, 1,000, 2,000 pieces of content that currently exist on the site. The easiest way to do this, by the way, is to go into the back end and go into Google Analytics and to export into a Google Sheet the top however many stories you would like to include in the audit. I think for a healthy site, at least 500 of the top stories. List these stories in a spreadsheet from highest performing to lowest performing. Then create a column and assess whether these highest performing stories ladder up to your new or existing brand goals and strategy. Usually, there will be some tweaking of the brand strategy and goals once you see what is performing really well with your audience. If there is a subject or topic matter that is performing exceptionally well with your audience, don't throw it out the window for no reason. Maybe there's a way to integrate that into your brand purpose and value statement. Seeing all of your top performing content in a spreadsheet format sorted from best performing to least performing will also help you find patterns in terms of keywording, topics, headlines, surprises, or even formats. You may find that slideshows and galleries perform exceptionally well for you, or you may notice that original photography or original recipes or creative content or DIY or a certain type of content performs well for you. It's not always as straightforward as chicken does great on a food site, although chicken does do great on a food site. One major area of growth that I see as a huge opportunity for most mainstream media organizations is development of best practices and optimization around audience acquisition and retention. Now, I'm not saying that media organizations don't have growth and retention pros on their teams. But what I am saying is that in my experience consulting with media companies and having some visibility into the inner workings of many of the major media companies and publishers in the United States, there are a lot of publications that operate like they have to invent this practice area from scratch. That is just not the case because content driven web has been around for nearly 20 years. It is okay to stand on the shoulders of giants. You don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. There are plenty of successful growth, audience retention, and acquisition pros out there who can bring learnings from previous jobs to your organization. And although very specific things that work for other websites may not work universally across the board, there are a lot of best practices that can be transferred from organization to organization. And having a great growth team working hand in hand with the product team and the editorial team can help innovate and grow your traffic exponentially. Speaking of staffing, especially in editorial and content production, I believe that it is really important to continually audit your staff. This includes setting individual goals for content production and traffic and innovation and trying new things and A B testing. All of these things need to ladder up to team goals, which need to ladder up to site goals, which also need to ladder up to revenue. Always keep in mind that for editorial and content businesses, traffic ladders up to revenue. And because editorial innovation and individual ideation on the editorial and content team can lead to direct revenue in the 21st century, things like sponsorships, partnerships, branded editorial content, e commerce, and innovative editorial packages can all generate additional revenue for a website business. Those are my very high level tips on how to grow a high traffic editorial and content website. If you have a specific question or even a case study you would like to submit for consideration for a future podcast episode, please visit danicalo.com and click on Media Hotline. There is a contact form on that page that you can use to submit your question or your case study. That's it for this episode of Media Hotline. Thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe on your preferred podcast platform, and I will see you in the next episode.